Thank you for this question because it's right at the heart of the explorations that the Emerald gets into, and and I'm not going to say that I have like a definitive, you know, this is the answer or this is the way to see it. Um, but but here are some things that we can kind of explore and check out together. So, like it or not, all of us are very influenced by the Western psychological vision of consciousness that basically says that there are four states of consciousness, right? Whether or not we choose to admit it, this does have an impact on us. We tend to see like, um, oh, I'm awake. It's a very blanket category of consciousness. Like I'm awake, right? Like I'm functioning, I'm walking through the street, I'm doing things, I'm awake. Therefore, that's like kind of this umbrella state of consciousness that everything gets lumped into. When, if you pause to take a look around in the grocery store at the varying states of consciousness that people are in, including ourselves, you can quickly see that there's more than one state of being awake, right? There's, there's kind of, there's the shopping stupor, right? That you get into. If you've ever been like shopping for too long and you start to get into kind of a, you know, there's like the shopping stupor, there's the caffeine trance, there's the sugar trance. Like all of these things are different states of consciousness. They're different gradations and states of consciousness, right? So immediately we have to understand that the way that we've been kind of taught to segment consciousness, it's not that reducible. There are thousands upon thousands of gradations of states of consciousness, you could say. And then it's also important that we understand that like really a huge drive within the human being, like a good percentage of what we do for consciousness alteration. Like, I mean, I gave the example of sugar and coffee, you know, yeah, I've talked to people who are like, no, I just really, really love the taste of coffee. And like, yeah, you love the taste of coffee and you do it for the consciousness alteration. Same with wine. I've heard people say like, like, oh, there's such a great culture around it. And I really love checking out the different grapes and the different, and sure, that's all true. And you do it for the consciousness alteration. Human sexuality, like, you know, it it obviously feels wonderful and fills us with like kind of sensory input in this kind of thing. And there's also very specific consciousness alteration associated with it. Hiking up a mountain, running a race, staring into a video game console for hours at a time, looking at our phone, all of these are trance driven. They're all driven by the states of consciousness. There was a one episode where I I was going to talk about this in a lot more detail, but the episode was getting kind of long. But I kind of went into an exploration of how much of like the gross global economy has to do with consciousness alteration. And when you really get into it, like a vast percentage of the things we do in one way or another are related to consciousness alteration. So, over the counter pharmaceutical medicines, painkillers, then, prescription painkillers, illicit drugs, video games, pretty much the entire entertainment industry is consciousness alteration in one way or another, right? So I'm just using this to set a foundation, right, for our conversation around your question. So the foundation I'm going to set is that there are thousands of trances, thousands and thousands of trances, and that the experience of these gradations of trance is really what human beings are are here for, right? Um, you know, Yeah, the self-help stuff, exactly. The wellness industry, like all of this in its own way is about consciousness alteration. Um, which is why anthropologists and ethnomusicologists studying traditional cultures, when they try to come up with blanket commonalities that all cultures, participate in, like what is fundamental to the human experience, ritual alteration of consciousness is universal. It's absolutely universal. They have not found a culture that does not ritually alter consciousness in some way or another. So that's like an important foundation, right? So, in the Tantric traditions, when you invoke a particular deity through a particular mantra, right? That that deity is what? Well, you can say that deity is an external entity, and it is in its own way. It's its own vibrational pattern. But that deity is also a state of consciousness, right? Like in the Tibetan Tantric traditions, like why do you do the red yogini practice as opposed to the yellow yogini practice? Because it has different qualitative effects on the individual practitioner within consciousness. It allows us to access something different. So every deity in the tantric viewpoint, they may not traditionally use the word trance, but I will use it because I think that sometimes we create a false dichotomy by not using the word trance, right? Every deity is a state of trance. Every deity is its own particular state of consciousness. Every goddess, every mantra, if you say over and over and over and over and over again, if you say like the Tibetan mantra, which some of you might be very familiar with, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, that has a different quality to it than Om Namah Shivaya, right? That has a different quality to it than Om Shakti, Om Shakti, Om Shakti, right? It has a different quality to it, those three things, right? How would you describe the qualitative differentiation? For me, I grew up with Om Mani Padme Hum as this kind of universal compassion, just this feeling of like, you know, Avalokiteshvara and Chenrezig and universal compassion. Right? Om Namah Shivaya brings a little bit more of like Shiva, the spacious mystic in there, like the holding of space for all this mysterious stuff to transpire. And Om Shakti, Om Shakti, Om Shakti carries with it what? The Shakti, the power, the vibrational power that play within the dance of creation. These are different. They're differing states of consciousness, right? Each deity practice is a different. When I've met people in the Tibetan traditions who've done the Mahakala practice for their entire lives, and when they turn it on, there's like a wrathful energy that pours through them, right? And then I've met people who've done the practice of, you know, green Tara predominantly for many, many years, and it's different. It's a different qualitative energetic. And the experiences and what we open ourselves to and what we're able to perceive in those states are different. So I would say that there are countless states of trance, countless trance states, as many trance states as there are facets to reality.